Shields up, Ironbreakers. Welcome back to Kast, and today I have a very special guest. We have Antony here from Keen Games. How you doing, Antony?
Good, and you?
I'm doing good. We're going to be talking about Enshrouded today, so I guess we can start by you telling us who you are and what do you do over there at Keen Games, who are the team behind Enshrouded.
Yeah, I'm Antony. I'm Creative Director at Keen Games. I'm also one of the co-founders of the company. And yeah, I mean, I'm doing games since quite a while, since I think around 30 years now. So it's been a while in the industry and mostly running my own company together with other people. So it's not just my only company or something.
You've managed to retain an impressive hairline for someone who's been working in this industry for 30 years.
Tearing your hair out is definitely part of the job. So
I've not been so lucky.
Yeah. So it's been a while as well, yeah.
Yeah. So I was curious about what was your inspiration for this project? Like, how did the idea come around? And kind of like tell people what is Enshrouded for people that maybe don't know what the game is all about, even though I've already covered it on the channel. There's gameplay, all of that stuff. But tell us more about what was your vision and kind of like how did you come up with the idea?
Okay, so yeah, Enshrouded is an open world multiplayer survival game, I would say, but it also has a lot of influences from other genres overall. It's set in a post-apocalyptic fantasy world, so it's a fantasy world that is not populated as you usually have in a classical RPG, but it has been devastated by an apocalyptic event in the past, and you as a player get back into the world and try to explore and basically revive parts of the lands by building a base and exploring what happened in the past. A special thing about the world is that it's basically flooded with a dangerous toxic fog that has taken over the lands. And so the world is split in a world above, which is looking more sunny and friendly, although it's also not. And there's a world below that changes to something completely different over time, basically. And there it gets dangerous and you can't stay there for long. And while exploring, this creates an interesting natural barrier that you have to overcome once in a while. And it's all about player freedom, which is generally a theme of survival games, I would say. A part of the survival part, obviously, but we try to keep it deliberately open, so it's one piece of world that you can explore. There are no loading screens or something in between, and so it has influences of an action adventure, action RPG game. There's character progression and a big world to explore with different biomes, and hopefully lots of interesting discoveries. And you can do it together with friends, which is a bit of a core motivation for us. It's like having a place where you can go out and have adventures with your friends together as a group. And it's more about your own stories than the story that the game tells you. I mean, there's lore in the world, but it's less of a classic RPG in terms of there's this big story arc you as a hero live through. It's more like what's next on your agenda, and the game only offers a lot of things that you could do potentially, and hopefully that keeps you entertained over a long period of time. Yeah, just to give you a rough overview.
Yeah, that's a lot of systems put together. It's quite an ambitious project, which was one of the things that I first noticed when I started playing it, which kind of led me to wonder just how big is the team currently working on Enshrouded? Because one of the things that I think is the most definitive about this game is just the level of ambition that you guys have going is absolutely insane.
I hope it's a compliment. We're about 60 people, roughly speaking. We are also self-publishing, so there's a bit of publishing people, but the majority, the lion's share, is development. We're also quite engineering heavy, I would say. And I mean, we had some good experience in the direction coming from another game we've made called Portal Knights, which is also survival sandbox, less survival, more sandbox style of game, so more in the direction of Minecraft with more action RPG things mixed in. And we definitely wanted to improve on this with our next game. So we had a lot of things that we liked about that game, but also a lot of things that we felt are lacking. So we definitely had an ambitious agenda to improve on this. And also, realized that some of this stuff was more complicated than expected, like making it open world and large and more players definitely added up to rewriting a lot of the stuff we had before. So basically, it's there's not much left for our old tech from the Borderlands game, but at least we started not from scratch going into this. But yeah, it is an ambitious project. I mean, it's also one thing that is interesting about the survival genre in general is that it's always a bit of a genre mix, which is certainly a red flag for most publishers. Like you don't focus on this thing and make it perfect. That's certainly a drawback. But on the other hand, it's an experience that is lacking out there to some extent, that you can do a lot of things in a game and have more agency for the player. So it's also, I think, a reason why some of these indie survival games are so successful, on the other hand, because it just is a gap that needs to be filled for some players at least.
There's not like a defined genre to it almost, because of all of the different systems that you guys are tackling, which is very... It was something that was very surprising to me. So I guess one of the first things that we should get into is you went with the early access business model, and I'm wondering, what is your plan in regards to that? Because we see nowadays that a lot of games come out in early access and then they just kind of like trail along in this eternal beta, right? And I'm wondering, like, what is your plan for where Enshrouded fits in a landscape like this?
Yeah, we definitely don't want to be forever in early access, as some other games do, and it's fine for them. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I think 7 Days to Die is even in alpha, maybe, so it's quite a long time. I'm not completely sure about that, but we definitely want to have a full launch at some point. We don't have a fixed date for this, but so I'm careful to put something out there.
Yeah, of course.
We don't want to stay there for too long. It certainly depends on what kind of feedback we get. That's the biggest thing for us, that we can get player feedback and get real life feedback to the game. And it's not just we make the game, we make a closed beta or something, which is much more limited and more focused, and then do a full release. And that's basically it. I mean, the plan is to support the game over a long period of time anyway. So even beyond release, it's going to continue in a similar model, I think. It's more like, up to release, we want to make the game more complete in a sense that we feel should be added to the game, that we still have in our agenda, but we obviously don't know about all the wishes that come from the outside. Now we know about some of them, or quite a lot, but that's a key thing, and also to refine the experience, the balancing, and all these kind of things to a level that players who are not as adventurous to jump into an early access game, and typically there is a barrier of entry for a lot of people to say, no, I play when it's finished, that they get like the experience of the game how it should be. But I think still there's a good bunch of game there for Enshrouded already, so players can really have fun, and it's not just a broken mess of a game that they should fix for us. So I hope early access is attractive enough to dive into it. But yeah, for us, it's really getting this hands-on experience and having, building a community around it that we can have a direct or more direct connection to, and see where the road takes us, basically.
I'm usually one of those players that it's like, oh, if it's early access, I don't know, because like there's so many games to play that are already finished that jumping into an early access game is usually kind of like a big risk, which is actually where the whole PR aspect came into it, because I initially was somewhat hesitant to jump into Enshrouded, and this is a very interesting thing, because I saw the trailer that you guys made for the Game Awards. I think it was last year, right? And last year's Game Awards, you had like this trailer. That was a very comical trailer, right? It was a trailer that was all about comedy. Oh, you're just doing whatever you want. And I was like, okay. So the vibe that gave me for Enshrouded is that it was going to be more of a comedy type game. So I thought like, okay, this is something I can see myself playing for a couple of hours. It'll be funny for a while, but it's mostly going to be something just for fun and for, like a stream type thing. Everybody has a laugh and then we're all kind of done with it. And so that's what I expected, right? And then I was very hesitant because the schedule in 2024 has been completely insane with game after game after game. And I was like, I don't know if I have time. So I was hesitant right into the last minute to request for a code. And so then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna request the code. But then in the thing that Evolve, who is working with you guys for the codes and whatnot, they had something that said, hey, if you want, you can ask for more than one. And I was like, oh man, I'm gonna ask last second, and I'm gonna be like arrogant enough to go ahead and ask for extra codes to get 2 of my friends into the game. Like, this is like worst content creator like ethical behavior possible. Hey, I'm just gonna come in last second. Can you guys give me 3 codes? So I was like, as respectful as I could, can I get like maybe 3 codes? Because I think this will be fun to have my friends over. And it was actually super surprising when we jumped into the game, because I was like, wait, this is not a joke game. This is not like a comedy game like that trailer at the Game Awards kind of made it seem like. This is actually a serious game. So you probably don't know, but the series that I usually play in my channel is Monster Hunter and Dark Souls games. That's kind of like my bread and butter. And I'm starting this game and I'm already corpse running like 5 times in a row because I'm stuck in the shroud and I keep dying.
Oh no. Yeah, so the comedy trailer thing might be a tricky one because, I mean, we put out an announcement trailer before and it had a more serious tone, obviously.
Yeah.
And with every trailer, we ask ourselves, okay, what can we do that is not just a rehash of what we put out there already? So we said, like, yeah, let's make it about this player freedom thing, but in a fun way. And yeah, obviously, some people never heard of it before. And because, I mean, we're an indie developer that not many people know, and it's a new game that nobody knew before, so obviously it's not super known. And then the first trailer you catch sets the tone, so this might have been not the best idea to start with the comedy stuff too early in the cycle of making the game known overall, but at least we got your attention.
yeah, that was the thing. Like, but neither me or my friends, we were all expecting something very different. And when we got into the game, we're like, no, wait, this actually has serious systems. This is not just a joke game. You actually have to pay attention. This has combat with dodges and parries, and I want to get deeper into the combat a little bit further on. But I was just surprised at how actually, you know, well thought out everything was with the shroud mechanics, and how at the beginning of the game the tutorial kind of leads you to go unlock different NPCs and all of that stuff. It was just very surprising early impressions, and I was like, wow, I'm actually way more into this than I initially thought, because like I said, I went into it just thinking, oh, we'll do like a joke stream and we'll all have fun and giggle, because again, because of the trailer, we all had that more comedic perception, and then we're like, no, actually this is way more serious. I didn't expect this.
Yeah, we were more deliberate with the first trailer to think about how we structure it and what kind of things we show first, or how we set the tone of it, because obviously it is a game with a lot of systems, so that is also a bit of a problem, like even selling the idea internally in our team, like making sure everyone's somewhat on the same page, and the same way to talk to people outside is, what exactly is it? I mean, I try to give a summary, but I always also struggle a bit because there's a lot of things to it, and they all play to this. I mean, it's less about the single feature, but the combination of things.
Yeah.
And that makes it tough to communicate. So we always try to find a fresh angle, and the comedy thing came to hand maybe a bit too early in the cycle, but at least it worked to catch the attention.
Yeah, but it
started anyway.
It was interesting. So before Enshrouded, another game came out. Obviously, this was one of the biggest successes of the year already. Which was Palworld, which I'm going to be completely honest. I've said this in previous videos as well. I thought that Palworld was going to be a scam, because like I was looking at the gameplay, like there's no way that this game is going to do all of these things that they're saying. And then the game came out and I was like, oh, this was very surprising. And so this was actually, for me, it was a bit of a catalyst that made me consider Enshrouded more, because usually I don't tend to play survival type games based on the fact that, oh, I don't want to sit here and have to babysit all of these. There's a hunger gauge and a thirst gauge and my character's mental health or something. It's like, no, I just want to go out and have an adventure. So usually I stay away from survival games. But because I had friends went out, they wanted to play Palworld, I was like, okay, I'll check it out. And then I was like, oh, this was actually kind of interesting. So I guess I'll try out Enshrouded and see what that is like. And it makes me wonder if the success of Palworld, if you feel that that is something that also influenced your own success, because I feel like you guys hit the 1 million marker very, very early upon release, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's hard to tell when it came out. I mean, I had it on my radar somewhat. Like they had trailers, I think, even years ago, and I saw it and
Yeah.
thought this looks crazy to some extent, but somewhat fun. But I personally didn't have it on my agenda in terms of its release schedule, so I'm not sure when it was announced. I think it was quite shorthand, but potentially our publishing guys had it all on the radar. But when it launched and it took off that extremely, we were a bit worried that basically everyone will have attention on Palworld and nobody will care about Enshrouded at all. On the other hand, I mean, it hopefully has pushed the interest to games in that space, and roughly it's in the same space, even if it looks like Pokemon, um, brings in more people because I mean, that many people typically don't flock easily to a survival game, and we can also argue about Enshrouded being a bit survival light in that sense. It's more like Valheim in terms of the hunger and other mechanics. And yeah, so potentially it definitely could have helped us even to be more successful in terms of bringing in fresh people that are interested in the genre. It's hard to tell. I mean, fortunately, we did release because we were briefly thinking about, oh shit, should we wait?
Should you delay?
Attention back again, like there's some air for us potentially as well. But yeah, we can't complain at all because, I mean, the success of Enshrouded also did surprise us. I mean, we had high hopes given the very positive response at Steam Next Fest last year, where we had a demo for a week and so, and that was super well received. So we thought, okay, it probably won't be a fail or anything, but we didn't expect that many sales that quickly, obviously. So that was super awesome.
Yeah, it was. Again, I was very surprised. I pulled up the Steam charts yesterday. You guys had a concurrent peak of 160,000 players, which I find interesting because nowadays everybody just looks at the numbers of Palworld and I was like, Palworld reached like one, and I was like, you need to understand that like this is a very big exception. This doesn't happen for everyone, and especially when you consider that you guys have a team of you said 60 developers. For you guys seeing a concurrent all-time peak of 160,000 players, like how surprising was that?
Yeah, that was obviously very surprising. I mean, we were hoping to have good sales at start to just, I mean, continue well enough and not have to work against it if it's not well received or not selling as fast or whatever. I mean, our plan was always to just continue working on it and trying to make it better and more attractive over time, even if it didn't take off at launch, but we were quite sure that it would be well received. But yeah, I mean, the level of the amount of players joining the game, and I mean, we're already past 2 million. I think
2 million sales
statements
now.
after that, so that is super awesome. Obviously, I mean, we can be at least on that side we can be quite relaxed, although we're not. I mean, we're still quite eagerly waiting, working on the next updates anyway. But yeah, it gives us just more room also to potentially do even more stuff. But yeah, I mean, Palworld was quite extreme in terms of its success. Also, Valheim was something we obviously watched with joy, I have to say. I mean, it came out during development, and we say like, oh, that's great. I mean, obviously this game exists, so we have to somewhat compete with it maybe, but it's still quite different to Enshrouded. But it was showing that there's an appetite for a co-op focused, a bit of a lighter survival side, but still a game in that space. And I mean, obviously, we didn't expect to replicate that kind of success because there were also a lot of factors. And Valheim is
of course.
An excellent game, especially crazy for the team size they have. So that was definitely also something that encouraged us, and Palworld took me at least a bit by surprise.
I think Palworld took everybody by surprise, but it was good to see that despite all of that, there were still a lot of people that were like, no, let's actually give a chance to this one. And to me, it was super surprising, and the fact that you guys were able to pull off at this point 2 million sales is very, very impressive for a team of your size. And it does make me wonder though, because whenever you were talking about how we're going to release this in early access and we're going to build upon it and do all of these things, one of the first things that comes to mind, especially in today's gaming environment, so to speak, everybody is worried about, okay, monetization plans, microtransactions, all of these things. and you guys are talking about we want to develop this for a decent chunk of time into the future. So what is your plans in regards to that, in terms of like how can we monetize things, or do you have plans, or are you planning on doing something more akin to like a No Man's Sky where they release it and then it's like, okay, 10 years, free updates. And it's like, I don't even know how feasible that is. It seems very extreme, but like, where do you land with your business plan moving forward?
Right. So I have to say we don't have a fixed plan yet, but I can say that we don't plan to do like monetize it in a way as free-to-play games do this, or some
season pass.
I won't name names. I don't think a season pass will be a thing. I mean, I think what we would consider, but we don't have fixed plans for, is a similar model as we did with Portal Knights. I mean, that exists out there. You can look at how that worked. At some point, I mean, we started out also making all updates for free. Like early access is pretty super clear for us. We won't monetize anything during early access. And beyond that, we will see how well the game works for itself. Obviously, No Man's Sky can do that. And if everything goes great, maybe that's enough to keep development going well enough. With Portal Knights, at some point, we said we need some additional revenue to keep going. So we put out paid DLC, which was basically like the Elven Moon, and you can explore a full new area of the world. In that case, with other new content attached to it, and it has a fixed price, so you can buy it.
So it's like an expansion.
It's an expansion, and that's something I could imagine that we do beyond release at some point. And what we also did is selling some cosmetics, although that was a lesser thing in terms of the monetization side for Portal Knights, in terms of the overall sales or money that it generated, but nothing that would make a difference in gameplay or anything like this. So we had, I don't know, a ring that makes a little rain cloud follow you around and stuff like this, or an outfit as a bunny, or whatever it is that you think is funny and you should buy. I think for us, this might be attractive to have some additional revenue, maybe at some point, but we are not Fortnite. We are not having this huge canvas to show off your stuff to 1 million people or whatever. It's more local, focused on your group, so it's not a big monetization thing. So a DLC model might be something for the future, but we'll see how well it goes. So for now, we had an excellent start. So
you don't need to worry about it for now at all.
We don't need to worry about it for quite a while, I think. And our original plan was also independent of a really successful start, that we would not monetize early access at all, and look at it beyond early access when we also plan to have a console release at some point. If we do additional DLC or something like this, like a new world to explore or whatever it is, as an additional thing that people can opt in Portal Knights. I mean, again, there we don't have specific plans. You could buy it and you could bring a friend who didn't buy it and play together. Something like this was quite fair, I think, in terms of monetization. I'm not sure if that's a feasible thing, so I don't want to put out statements that I get held accountable for. I'm not responsible for this. I'm not on the publishing side, but rather development. But we are all on the same page that we don't want to make it like a free-to-play game, or even some not free-to-play games that start monetizing things in strange ways, I have to say. So that's something I think I'm pretty sure about that we won't do.
I feel like the gaming community, when it comes to that type of stuff, we're all still, at least I think a majority of the people that watch me, at least, we're all very much about the old school expansion model, wherein, okay, you have this game, you work on it, you fix it, you patch it, and then if you want to monetize it further, you can come up with like a big expansion that adds like, let's say, I don't know, an average of 30, 40 hours of more content or something like that, and you can sell that. Again, like that is a model that I think is underrated nowadays, because a lot of publishers and whatnot are more concerned about, no, we need a nickel and dime and sell you like this armor set and this thing and the other thing. And I think that is one of the things that people don't really like, is when they start feeling like, oh, you're selling me like all these different little things and it's getting annoying. People just want like, no, make an expansion to your game and we'll buy it and it's fine. And if that's like where you're coming from, I think that is going to be a good business model for you to go into. But naturally, there's still a lot of work to do in the current version of Enshrouded, right?
For sure. So that's our main concern for now, to really make the game as good as it can be for full release. and yeah, look at this later. But obviously people are worried about these kind of things. I mean, it pops up here and there, and I can say I'm also not a big fan of this as a player, basically, and as a game designer, I'm also a bit worried when the game design needs to steer people into buying stuff too hard, because that obviously changes the game itself. And for my taste, the game should be about the fun and less about the monetization part. Obviously, we need money to keep working, but yeah, something like No Man's Sky at least has managed to live just from additional game sales. I mean, it has an extreme start, obviously, for various reasons, and they're doing, I think, pretty well, and also, turned around the game in an exceptional way. So I think that's really cool. But yeah, we have to see how the future will look like. With Portal Knights, it's always something that you're also worried about. Like, can we continue working on this? And at some point, back then we worked with a publisher, so it wasn't our choice if we want to continue or not. We would have potentially gone longer, but obviously it's clear that it needs to have a financial basis. If you want to work on it, the team needs to get paid somehow. And at some point they said it doesn't work anymore, so we can't afford making updates, so we have to stop it. And then that's acceptable for us as well. This time around it's our game, so at least the decision is on us.
You have much more control.
Ever has to happen, I hope not. But as the game is not like online only or other things that makes players sad if a team can't support it anymore, I think that's hopefully a safer environment overall. But yeah, our plan is to support it really long, and given the success we had so far, I think it's definitely going to happen.
So for starters, it's just really refreshing to hear from like a development standpoint that you also feel that a lot of times microtransactions can kind of bring about the wrong type of motivations for development, which is one of the things that I feel a lot of people are very hesitant to bring up when they're working on your side of the aisle, so to speak, right? That they don't really want to talk about those things. And they're just like, no, this can affect gameplay development. And it's one of the things that a lot of people kind of skirt around. So thank you very much for being that candid with that specific point. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's very clear that people care about this, and it is delicate. I mean, obviously, if you work with publishers, it's not your choice as a developer how to monetize things. Typically, this is decided upfront in development if it's going to be a free-to-play game or a paid-for game, and in our case, it's a paid-for game, so we're not going to monetize it in a free-to-play way. I think cosmetics are still fair game from my perspective, as it shouldn't alter the gameplay as long as there's enough other content that people just have the feeling they can play even or as fine without doing this kind of things. Again, like Portal Knights in our example, I think what we might opt to go for, so everyone feel free to look at it, how that looks like. But maybe we don't need that at all. I can't tell. It's also not my call alone, so to be honest.
In that situation, one of the things, almost like to provide feedback, just in case you're curious, one of the things that I usually look at whenever a video game is monetizing cosmetics is like, okay, you're monetizing cosmetics. Is there a comparable cosmetic that I can get in the game, right? Mm-hmm. Just for playing the game. And at that point, if I can get a bunch of cosmetics in game and then you want to sell some on top on the side, personally, I don't really have a problem with it. So long as they have a certain degree of comparability, because let's say, for instance, okay, you can get this cosmetic and you look like a homeless person. And then in the store, it's like, and here you look like a king. And it's like, okay, see, sure. That kind of sucks.
I'm pretty sure if we would do that at some point, it will be more like there's some comparable stuff. Maybe not the same, the specific theme that is
of course.
A key thing for people. Because obviously there needs to be an incentive to buy it after all. But it shouldn't affect the game, or should you feel worse than your friends too much. Again, like it's not a game where you have a big canvas to show off to the millions of other players that I'm cool. I bought the golden outfit for $1,000 or something. That's not our plan. I can say that for sure.
And that was another thing that I really liked that you also brought up in your previous point, which is this is not an always online game. It would have been easy for you guys to kind of like do something like that and potentially even monetize servers or something like that. That is something that you could have went down the route. But not only you didn't do that, but the purchase of the game and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the purchase of the game also includes a dedicated server that you can host yourself. But you don't even need to do that because you can host games just from the game itself, and your friends can just join seamlessly, and you can join your friends.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing there is that the world only advances for the hosts, and the guests, they get their own worlds when they're in their own stuff.
Exactly. Like if you host a game locally, like a peer-to-peer connection, then you have the save game on your hard disk, basically. So if your friend wants to continue playing, you need to be online to bring up that save game again, basically. But people can hop around worlds. They can take their character with them. So it's not that I need to start from scratch in a different world or something. I can take my character and join your world or whatever, and we can play together. Like I help you with a boss or something that you struggle with or whatever it is. And then play single player in my world if I want to, or play with a different group. Like that's really up to players. And a dedicated server brings the persistency of this always world that is always there, and anyone can join at any time and just advance something. Like but so I think that's an added benefit. And you can rent servers, but you can also host your own, so there's no limitation on that end.
That's one of the things that to me I find really important in games like this nowadays, because there's always that thing, especially like we even recently had the example of The Crew. It's like, oh, our game is now going offline and it's done. And it's like there's a legitimate concern from a lot of gamers where it's like, oh, they're just removing the games. And it's like in a game like this one, that doesn't really happen because you have the server technology when you buy the game, and you can just host the servers. You don't even need the server technology, but just in case you want to make a dedicated server, you can do one yourself. And putting that in the hands of gamers, I think, is the right move.
We can't take it back, and I think that's also a bit of a regular move in the survival space, at least. I mean, there are some exceptions, but most games allow you to host the server then on your own. And we also thought about alternative models, but independent of that, it also puts the burden on us to actually host servers, make sure they're always online and all these kind of things. And yes, there are hosting companies out there that do that, basically not on our behalf, basically. So everyone can host servers, so they can try to monetize that. But if something goes wrong, it's like we don't need to manage a server infrastructure to keep the game going. And I'm personally also a bit worried that we make a game and in a couple of years, obviously, we can already tell, like after 20 years, the game will be offline or something. That would be very sad, I think.
It's good that you guys plan for that, and you have all of this basically flexibility in the way that players can experience it. And it also led me to question, so the game, you can play it single player, you can also play it multiplayer. I've experienced it both ways, and I'm just curious, like, which was the more intentful design on your end? Would you say that, like, no, we want this more as like a multiplayer experience, wanted more like a single player experience, or is there like a different philosophy behind it?
It's it's a bit tricky. It's a bit in between. I mean, also coming from Portal Knights, we had a similar system. It was just 4-player limited for multiplayer, and you could play it single player or bring friends, and you can play with up to 4. We also had dedicated servers there, but they didn't take off so much because they had the limitation of 4 players only, which is really small. But our intent for the next game was the majority of players might still be interested to play it single player. At least that was the case for Portal Knights. We had the intent to push multiplayer more, like make it more attractive for players to play multiplayer overall, and make hosting things easier and give players more room for more players to join in, to make it more meaningful. Because we saw that the multiplayer people who played Portal Knights in multiplayer just played the game for so much longer. And also from our own experience, the game is just more fun if you play it with friends. I mean, that's true for every game, I would say. If you play together, it's a different experience. Like, you have this personal dynamic that comes in, and that's awesome. It's always tough to be forced to have gaming friends that want to join in. I mean, even if you have friends that play, they might not be willing to play this game specifically at this given time. And so it's always a bit tricky to bring a band together to make it work. So it was important for us that the game works single player and offline, if you like, and you can experience it well enough. But we want to give incentives. If you play multiplayer, the game gets easier, it's more fun. You can progress faster, these kind of things to make it, you can build bigger things and all these kind of aspects that makes just the game more fun, and gradually add some experience that are more challenging, that like the Hollow Hordes, which we recently added. You can solo them, but it is tough.
It's going to be tough, yeah.
And yeah, so some people will struggle with that, but we made sure it's possible at least, and that there is an incentive next to the road. It's not the main path through the game. So even if you have to skip it, maybe you skip it for some time and come back when you're much higher leveled, and then it's easier for you to just solo it. If you can't solo it at the point when they are introduced in the game from the balancing side, maybe it's too tough, because obviously it requires some skill to play well enough. It's more challenging because also some other players criticize us for being too easy, and so it's tough to make offers for all of these things without excluding too many people. So we want to put tougher challenges next to the main road, basically, so to say, that players can seek a challenge, or they just have to grow over time their character and their capabilities, and if they return, they have an easier time for sure.
That's one of the things that I was wondering, because I didn't do thorough testing like up until this point, because again, it's one of those things where your game is in early access, so I want to be playing it when it releases. So I'm not going to go ahead and like, I'm going to put 100 hours into the early access of Enshrouded, right? So up until this point, I have around 38 hours of gameplay, which some of them were actually quite recent, kind of like to prepare for this podcast, because I played a ton when the game came out, then I took a break, and now I played a little bit more with the more recent update to check out some more things. But so I have 38 hours, and one of the things that I'm curious is, so the game doesn't scale according to what you told me, right? So if I have 3 players in the world, there's no scaling going on. There's nothing that makes it more challenging. Or is there something? Okay.
Yeah, there's something. So the game will get more difficult when other players join you. It's measured in groups that are local. So if you have, let's say, 16 players on a server, rare case maybe, but everyone's in a different place on the world, the game will be balanced like for a single player. So you're not running into super hard difficulty spikes. But if let's say all of them bulk together and visit one place, obviously this will be a bit of a chaos, but let's say it's just 4 players, then the game will add difficulty for every other player that joins you. But it's not doubling in difficulty for the second player or something. So the game keeps getting a bit more challenging, but not as challenging as the second player. So the game overall gets easier, but it's not like the single player game and you put in 3 more players and you just run through it or something. So there is some scaling, but yeah, it's local, and yeah, the Hollow Halls have even some more specific thing in that. I'm not sure if it's necessary to explain, but it's there's some scaling. We're obviously trying to refine this together with the overall balance of class balance between classes and all these kind of things, where we get a lot of feedback now. But yeah, we at least try to set this up in a way that it's fun to bring in players, but not destroying your experience at the same time.
I don't know if you want to go into detail, but that is something that I'm curious about. Like, what type of scaling? Do mobs get more health? Do they deal more damage? Do you get more mobs in a specific location? Like, what is the...
Yeah, so the damage and health is scaling. I don't know the details about the Aggro system right now. It's also something we currently make some changes to, probably. But we have a specific lower end ceiling for the Hollow Halls. So it's basically kept from the balancing at 2 players being present. So even if you come alone, the game feels like as if you would have been 2 players. So that's why they are also tougher, independent of the fact that there are lots of mobs and stuff. So they are a challenge. But if you bring a second player, the game will not scale as it would do in other places, because typically you don't encounter that many enemies. And so scaling up in other places makes sense instantly. In the Hollow Halls, this would have been too extreme. So we have it kept in a certain way. But for a third player, for example, the Hollow Halls, it will also add an additional bonus to the enemies again, like it gets tougher again. But again, like not linearly tougher, that it just is equally tough. So the more players you bring, the easier it will get over time.
Because Hollow Halls was one of the things that I wanted to test, because I hadn't tried any of those, and I went ahead and I tried the very first one, which I think is like the level 10. And so I was there with a friend of mine, and there was the two of us, and we're like, okay, this is no joke. When we got close to the end and like the 4 doors open or whatever, and just skeletons swarm from everywhere, I was like, oh, okay, this is a little bit crazy. Yeah. And that was very insane. And now I understand why that one felt like it was a little bit more challenging. It is because it is scaled for 2 players properly. And that did feel like that. My friend actually died a couple of times. I didn't, because I'm the tank, so I was like running around and stuff. But that's actually one of the things that I wanted to mention. Just like, it's not super important right now because you guys just implemented it, but aggro does not appear to be working in Hollow Halls. I don't know if it is or if it isn't, but because I have both the aggro skills. Yeah. I have both of the aggro skills, and enemies would just run right past me to go kill my friend.
Yeah, that's certainly not okay. I mean, I think there were some bugs. I'm not 100% into the specifics of the aggro system right now, so it's worked on by other people. But we introduced something that not everyone flocks to the tank just because he has these skills, because at some point the single player is too saturated with enemies. They can't even reach you. So we made it deliberately that some enemies, if you already have whatever 10 surrounding you, then there's no way to attack you anyway. So they will seek, or they will increase an incentive to seek for another player potentially. But maybe something was actually broken in this. I'm just not 100% sure. So we're also working on a bigger overhaul on that system. Not sure we will release that because that's obviously a sensitive thing. But it also didn't work perfectly well. It's the problem with these masses of enemies, because there were like 50 guys coming at you. If you just imagine the tank, by just having these skills, binds 50 people, and the other ones can just stand there relaxed in the background shooting fireballs and stuff. Maybe that's then too easy because he can't be hit by more than X enemies around him because it's just physically blocked at some point.
That was my brilliant plan. I'm just going to hold aggro on everything, and you can kill everything from far. This is perfect. But the enemies had a different idea, so
they did have. But I think there was something not completely okay, and the Hollow Halls was also quite an extreme example. We'll try to fine tune that to make it better in the future, I promise. But it's a tricky thing because we always try to keep people engaged in combat, and there are a lot of things that we want to improve and work on that makes it a bit more of a dance and less like I can just stand there, have the right equipment, and just press fireball, 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 or whatever it is that I kind of exploit to some extent. We will try to get a bit of a balance that you can make these powerful moves, but then you need to change your position or do something in between so it gets more into a certain rhythm, or you need your other players, like you tried, to be the tank to attract the enemies and bind them, and then I can fire more freely. So that's at least intended. With the extremely large groups, that's still a challenge where to strike a balance at some point. But that's what early access is for us as well. I think we have a good starting point, so people have fun with the game, but obviously there's a lot of things that get criticized, like overpowered or underpowered items and skills that don't do the trick for some people that need improvements or nerfs. And I think that's natural because it's complex systems. Like we have a lot of systems anyway, and so that's natural. But I think hopefully a larger majority of players still have good fun with the game overall. But we're really doing our best to fine tune these things with every update we make, to make changes to some portions of that. Sometimes we might even overreact on some things, and then we have to turn it back again to some notch. We'll see. I mean, that's a natural thing in a
there's going to be an ebb and flow to it. But that was one of the things that really surprised me while we're on the topic of like aggro and whatnot, is that you've essentially created a system within Enshrouded that's almost like an MMO light, because you have this classless system of skills, which I think was one of the most surprising things as well. Because I jump into the game, I'm already surprised at like, okay, no, this is actually a serious game, serious combat. And then as I play more, I start and I look, hey, what's this skills thing? And there's this big tree, not talking like Path of Exile big, but still reasonably
Sure.
big when you take into account that like you guys are doing voxel technology. You're doing building where players can actually build whole cities if they want to. You're doing in-depth crafting system. There's a loot system. There's all of these things mixed in, and then you add the skills. And the skills was one of the things that really caught my attention because I was like, okay, so this is classless because you can put skills wherever you want, and you can go towards more archery, more rogue type assassin-y stuff, more berserker warrior, more healer. Like, what was behind that system? Like, what was your thought process there? Because again, it's just that level of ambition that is insane.
um, yeah, it also was part of the overall theme that we say that the game is about player freedom, like setting your own goals and then trying to play the game your way. Part of the joke trailer, basically, like exaggerating this. And so in Borderlands, we had fixed classes. Like when you start up the game, you had to choose if you want to be a mage or a warrior or a ranger or later on a rogue or beastmaster and stuff like this. So, but you don't know how it plays before you just get into the game. You might have a rough idea. Oh, I like to play mages, but maybe the mage in this game plays different than you expect, and it's not as fun as you expect. So but I'm half in there, and then I have to train a new character and all these kind of things. And also what happens if a friend joins you after you've played for whatever 20 hours already and you've skilled to a certain degree, and then another guy comes in and he's the exact copy of you or something, and yeah, maybe you want to diversify, but then you don't also want to start from scratch. So there were a lot of reasons to make it open, that it can respec and change your class. And yeah, again, like it was fitting the survival theme that you start with nothing. You're a blank slate thrown into this world, and you have to start to overcome the basic obstacles that you have in these games typically. Like you get eaten by wolves and then try to chop some trees, and that's everything that makes you happy in the first place. But later on, as you advance, you want to dive deeper, and giving players, again, like freedom of choice, how they want to shape their character, how they want to refine their play style and experiment with combinations that create fun effects, maybe sometimes fun exploits that you need to take care of to some degree. But there was, yeah, the feeling of, yeah, I can be a lot of things and I can change my way I play easily. And if I am in a group, I can adapt to that. And let's say, yeah, we were both warriors or both were all-rounders when we started the game, because that might make sense. A bit of arrow shooting, a bit of melee weaponry, maybe even a bit of magic, just to get around as a single player. But then if a second player joins, yeah, it makes sense to have a tank that can go forward, but draws the attention of all the enemies, but then specializes more in that sense to take all the damage and be robust. And then you can have a glass cannon in the background that deals the ranged additional stuff on top of it. And yeah, that freedom was essentially the key part that led us to the decision to make it more of an open map and less like an upfront hard choice. You lock in your character with this decision for the time to come, because some people want to play games all over again, playing as a different class and starting it again. That's fun. But I think the majority of people just pick one, play through the game, or how far they get. Typically, most people don't even play through games.
Yeah.
And stick to it. And then so they might feel like they're locked into something that doesn't feel right for them, and then they can't easily go back. So that was also a bit of a worry.
Yeah. So this one's going to be more for me specifically, because I always like being a tank. But being a tank comes with a bit of a problem, which is if you're putting points into skills that do nothing but increase your aggro, when you're playing by yourself, they're worthless because you're going to have aggro no matter what you do. So I was wondering if there's anything that the team has thought about that, like maybe a secondary effect for having aggro or something like that. Because, like, for instance, if you're a healer, heals are still useful when you're by yourself. Right.
Sure.
And most of the other classes, that most things are useful even when you're solo, but aggro is worthless. And there's 2 nodes. I don't know exactly how many skill points there are, but there's at least 2 nodes for aggro, which is significant investment of skills. Because I think that the level cap right now is 25. Yes.
Yeah, for players it's 25.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's true. I mean, there are other skills in there, like healing your companions faster. If that also only makes sense in multiplayer. Not sure how many other multiplayer specific things we have. I mean, some of the auras obviously have a multiplayer effect that might be lesser for a single player, and at some point it might be less attractive. I think the water aura was super popular.
My friend uses that. See, it's perfect. I play as a tank. He has the healing aura. It's perfect. I have the earth aura, so it's fantastic.
So it adds up. So we try to put in incentives. Some things obviously might make only sense in multiplayer. I would have to double check how much of a roadblock this kind of skill might be, but I'm not 100% sure if they're on a branch or if they are blocking the path beyond that. I think they're pretty.
No, they're at the end. They're exactly last two nodes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They're far into the tree, so it shouldn't block your progress towards the skills behind that potentially. With a skill that you can't make use of, hopefully. Otherwise, we would have to look at this again if the branching is done perfectly well. But yeah, the intention is that there are utility things mixed in there. I mean, there's the double jump or the zooming in on targets for the ranger, or the updraft that does additional stuff. For sure, a lot of these things are still valuable in single player. But yeah, we'll also add more multiplayer focused things in the future.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure. I mean, we want to extend the skill tree with more stuff. Can't promise how soon, but maybe not too far in the future. Adding some more things. But yeah, that comes back to we want to incentivize that people bring in their friends and have an even better experience. And obviously, class specialization is a big part of that. If you specialize, you will be more powerful as a group, and team play is more fun. Compared to everyone does the same job basically, although that's
like I said, this isn't something that I'm like, oh, you guys need to do something to
aggro.
Sure, but it was I was just like wondering if okay, so that's a design decision, and hey, if you're specializing for multiplayer, you can either respec if you want to play better solo, or you can figure it out. But yeah, I think that's fine. I think that's a fine design approach to it. By the way, I don't think that's a bad thing. But yeah, and while we're on that, I guess we could get into the action combat, because this is one of the things that kind of surprised me, action combat in a voxel type game, because there's so much stuff already happening and computating in the background, and voxel is also one of the things that I want to dive a little bit deeper into.
Sure.
But I was very surprised with how snappy the combat is. It's not perfect at this point, because again, we're still in early access, obviously, and there's some very specific feedback that I have. But right now we have melee attacks, we have wand attacks, we have spells. I don't even know how spells work, because I've played 30 hours and never casted a spell.
Okay.
You got dodge rolls, parries, there's the auras, all of that stuff. And this is even though it's somewhat basic right now, the diversity that you have with actions in this combat system was very surprising. Are you planning on making it even more in depth, or do you think that no, the combat's in a good place, just needs some refining? What are your plans there?
We definitely want to also make it more in depth. I mean, the combat. I mean, we didn't have the ambition to make it a Souls-like, which is a common thing nowadays. Everyone makes a Souls-like game. Obviously, there are comparable things in our combat system for sure. I think we are somewhere in between, or we also looked at a lot of different games, obviously also the Souls games and Sekiro and whatnot, Bloodborne and others, but also Breath of the Wild. I mean, you can see it from other angles as well, was a big influence. Their combat is lighter, I would say, but also pretty snappy and catchy in a lot of ways. It's also a single player game, so yeah, so right now we wanted to keep combat approachable, but wanted to give it more depth. Again, like referencing Borderlights, there the combat was rather simplistic because the game was aimed more at a young audience, but we realized we actually got a more grown-up audience than we thought in the end. But the combat was criticized for being too button mashy and a bit shallow in that sense, and that's certainly true. And we want to give it more depth. And independent of the refinements of balancing skills and attack timings and all these kind of things, we also want to work on the way combat works for specific weapons, like to give it a little more finesse. I think two-handed weapons are something where we make experiments with currently to make them more attractive potentially. Same to give the the warrior some additional tricks to make his combat more dynamic. But I can't specifically say what, because it's really not clear how this ends, if it works or not. But at the same time, we will also introduce more weapon types over time. This is a longer project thing for the more weapon types. I mean, people asked for dual wield and
of course
large two-handed swords and all these kind of things, and or more variety in ranged weapons. And we'll have to see how quickly we can get to it. We are definitely looking also very actively at adding something, but this will take more time, because the main focus is to get the existing combat in a great state, like from a balancing perspective, or not just balancing, but also all the mechanics attached to it. But yeah, we're also looking at how we can give it more depth, also from the enemy side, to add potentially additional members to a certain faction, to make it more challenging, or make the player react to things that make the combat more interesting and more in depth. So we definitely don't want to stop where we are and just say, let's make some fine touches and that's it. But we also don't want to put it on its head, basically, and revamp it completely and make something completely different. It's not as you see, it's much faster than a typical Souls game in that sense, and it feels different. It's less one-on-one focused. I mean, you have a lock-on system, but I often play without that, to be honest. But that's a personal choice.
That tells me that you're playing with mouse and keyboard.
Actually, I play half and half. I would say maybe even more with a controller, just to make sure that the game works well with a controller. I also, personally like console games, but mostly still play PC games because it's more convenient to sit at my desk. But so it's a bit of a mix. I think that also makes it hard sometimes to do something in a certain way, because we always have to be mindful to not break controller compatibility, even for PC players. I think for action games like action adventures and stuff, or action RPGs, a lot of people play with controllers. Surprisingly,
I play your game with controllers. As a matter of fact, it's interesting because whenever I'm at the base and I need to do inventory management and stuff like that, I'd rather use the mouse and keyboard, because I feel like you haven't really refined the controls for swapping stuff around. Like moving something from one box to the next is like triangle and right D-pad, and I was like, this is so weird.
We're currently fixing that, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
It has been a single click, but we want to add functionality to make swapping between the action bar possible. That's a different direction, so the direction thing came in.
But it's like
spoiling some stuff that's coming, but so that didn't feel perfectly well, and we try to bring that
but like
functionality back.
The way that I've been playing it is mostly any inventory management or base building or anything like that is mouse and keyboard, and then anything combat wise, I actually can barely play a mouse and keyboard. It has to be on controller, because I just
for me it's also easier, to be honest, to play with the controller in combats, but for building and stuff, you just have more precision with a mouse typically. But I hope it works well enough for both sides. But also there, I mean, we try to improve also the interface and other things, and work on the UI to make things more comfortable.
But it's good to know that you guys are already thinking about new weapons. Obviously, I know for a fact that I haven't even seen any feedback on this, but just looking at the enemies and I see them coming in with dual wields, I'm like, oh, players are going to want to do that. There's no way everybody's going to want to do.
There's discussions out there,
Even just the other day, I picked up 2 of those butcher knives that you get from the green dudes, and I was like, oh, I even instantly went to the shield. Oh wait, you can't dual wield yet. That's not a thing in the game. But yeah, that I imagine is a thing. But if I could maybe make a suggestion, which again, it's just one of those things that whenever I like a game, I'm like, oh man, this would be cool. I think it'd be interesting if you try to find weapons that are more unconventional. I don't know. Maybe that's just a me thing, but like something different, like maybe something like a special weapon that you can throw. Instead of just it being like, say you have a hammer. Well, think for instance Thor's hammer, right? Just as a basis, you can throw this hammer. And something like that. But like I feel that unconventional weapons, obviously being properly balanced and whatnot, that is one of the things that a lot of times get ignored because everybody's thinking in terms of traditional medieval weapons. Oh, let's think about, we get a spear, we get dual wields, this type of stuff. But I think it's more interesting if you come up like, hey, a bow staff. Let's make a bow staff for no reason. I think that'd be cool.
Like swords with guns into it, like Final Fantasy.
I didn't want to bring that up because I'm very partial to like weapons with guns, but you went there by yourself. That's a fantastic idea. I agree. 100%.
Weapons with guns are confirmed. No, I mean, probably not so fast. It's always a bit of a struggle. I think, we have a fantasy theme. I think it's not super conventional in that sense, but still try not to stray too far from what people can connect with, basically. But I think on the other side, I also like this aspect a lot in terms of we try to implement a lot of secrets, for example, and like discovering things that are special in a game always makes me very happy, whatever it is, independent of it's a weapon or something else or something that surprises people. And so that's definitely one of our aims to put in surprises as much as possible. In terms of secrets was one angle of that. Making unique things obviously is always a bit of a struggle because you have to put a lot of effort to make a new weapon type in the first place.
Yeah.
And then if you only have this one thing then, and it's not something that typically most players will use, then it's a tougher sell to say, let's make this first and leave the swords out, for example. So we need to have support for the stuff that people expect to fulfill their class fantasies and stuff that they want to play. And I still think, some room for more, but I'm all up for making exotic things in the game. So let's hope we get to this sooner than later to make you happy as well.
So one of the big defining things that you have in this game is obviously using voxel technology, which for a lot of people, they might even not, what does voxel technology mean? And to me, again, this is, I have my layman definition is we can just destroy everything in the world. We can modify everything in the world and nothing is set in stone, right? That's kind of like the basis behind voxel technology. I'm not sure if you would agree or if you have
some. No, sure.
Yeah. Okay. So, where did you guys come up with the idea that we wanted voxel technology for our game, and why is it important for what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so it was, I think it was pretty clear for us that we wanted to have a creative angle to base building, and a lot of survival games. I mean, it's part of survival games to build shelter and to have a home somewhat. Depending on the type of game, it might be more functional or more decorative, let's say. I mean, Minecraft, for example, is voxel-based, and it's probably the most popular example of that, where you can build exceptional things with very simple tools that people easily understand. So I think that's a prime example of what voxels can offer in terms of the creative freedom. You can get really into details and build whatever, replicas of real-world locations and whatever it is. That people do there. And then there's the other approach that is also found in a lot of games, which is more props based. So like you stick together pre-built models that the developer puts into the game, like a piece of wall that is completely built, and there's a piece of wall with a window or a door frame or something like this. And it's easy and quicker to build something, obviously, but it limits yourself a bit to more samey looking bases that way, easily at least. I mean, this can be countered with offering just a sheer unlimited amount of props that players can choose from, but still it keeps that chunkiness to it. For sure, voxel games like Minecraft also have a certain chunkiness to it because those blocks are big, so they're meter sized compared to your character. Most of them are more like cartoonish. I think the only example that I have on my radar is like 7 Days to Die has also, I think, voxel world, where you can dig tunnels and stuff. But the creative freedom that the voxel stuff gives you, and it was also something we were very pleased with Portal Knights, is that people can get really crazy once you give them voxel materials and props on top of that. They can build their own shapes of castles and homes and whatever it is. And that's something that people can spend infinite amount of times with. And so that's always great. I mean, no game can offer enough content you can play it forever, except it's other players basically, and we didn't want to make a PvP game in the first place. So there's always this end game feeling when you have consumed all the content, and sure, there might be stuff that keeps you busy to some extent, but yeah, at some point you wait for the next update. But building can keep you basically busy forever, and that's cool. So we definitely wanted to lean into the creative side of this, and Voxels, we had some really good experience with Portal Lights where people could share their bases via Steam Workshop, for example, and they built some incredible stuff as well. Much cooler stuff that we could build in the game, for example. There's crazy things. And the same thing happened with Enshrouded, to be honest. It's not just the destructibility of the world, which goes into the player freedom side of things. Like you can come up with creative ways to take out a camp of enemies, like digging a tunnel or throwing bombs and then getting them stuck in a hole and then whatever, dealing with it in a different way. It's really also a big chunk about the base building side, and that we can offer something that is feeling different. As we wanted to make a game that is more for a grown-up audience this time around and not just aimed squarely at kids, it was important for us that it looks more like a classical open world game. So we have two types of voxels in the world. Like there's this organic terrain voxel stuff that can take any shape, and grass is growing on top of it and it really feels organic, I think. And you can do mining and dig caves and all these kind of things, and it looks natural. And then there's the building voxels, which are blocky, but also get some magic decorations on them to make them look more like a pre-built thing you would expect in another game, or even in a classical open world game that doesn't have building. So to make it look immersive, but yeah, give players really this freedom of modifying things. And at the same time, have a build system that makes it easier to use than Minecraft or Portal Lights, where you have to build block by block, which takes a lot of time and feels tedious to a lot of people. And they say they're not creative enough, so they don't want to dive into that at all. But rather, we offer a system where you can put down these big chunks, like a big wall, and it's a hybrid basically.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is about it, once you've placed it, it's still just voxels. You can just modify them or add more stuff to it if you like to. So you don't have to, but you can opt in at any time and start modifying and decorating them, and to the extent you like.
That actually makes a huge difference, because that's kind of like how I built my main base, which I'll tell you more about, because it was this really crazy journey that I went on to make that base. But before that, one of the things is that I've noticed when you're building, so let's say you want to build something out of wood. So you have the logs, and then you have to convert those into building blocks, and then you can use the building blocks to actually do the stuff. And I was just wondering, why do you feel that there's this need to have this in-between step? Because it just felt to me like it made everything way slower when I was building my base. Why can't I just pick up these rocks? And you already know that I have enough rocks to build however many blocks, and it just uses the rocks instead of having this intermediate step.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tricky thing. It gets into the calculation side of things. It's not that complicated after all. But the problem is, and we also discussed this variation. For one, there's multiple stone blocks that you can make, like out of the same material. For sure, we could just have different costs to them, and that's basically it. But at the same time, you have the problem of you also build other stuff from the same materials. Like it's also a crafting ingredient. And to make it possible that you get a decent amount of blocks, like I think 2 or 3 stone give you 100 blocks. And if you want to destroy one of those blocks that you've placed, you want to get something back.
I get it.
And so also if you break them in the open world, you get some resource back. But it's not the same amount that accumulates, basically. It's similar to mining, where you have to make a certain amount of hits and stuff, and then you can get a block back. But so there's a big gap between the 2 stones that I need, like maybe to craft a pickaxe, and the 100 blocks I get, and how to deal with that size amount. And so there's some magic conversion going on in different directions. And so it was really tough. We tried to do it back and forth, plus the thing that it will consume all these materials automatically while building, which can also easily deplete your resources, and you didn't mean to do that, which is another angle to this conversion thing. It's similar than if you craft stuff and you craft too much and then all your wood is gone or something. that's less of a problem, but the main thing for us was this discrepancy between we want to have this large amount of blocks and how to deal with the conversion rates between those kind of things as we need them in other recipes as well.
It also means that you can put some of these blocks available as loot. That's one of the things that I've noticed is that sometimes you just go somewhere, it's like, oh, here's a new type of block that you've never seen before, and now you can use this to add building stuff in your base, which for people that do a lot of building is probably going to be something that they enjoy, going out into the world and finding those rare blocks and whatnot. But yeah. So another really cool thing that I found from the voxel technology is that it basically allows you to just do whatever you want. But I am curious about one aspect of it, which is, let's say I start digging up a wall and I just make like a big hole in the open world and then I go away. Like, does that regenerate? Because like I said, there's been big breaks since I've last played, and I've noticed in some locations I feel like, oh, this never regenerated from this hole that I made. In other locations it did. Like, is there something where the world regenerates to its original state, or is that not a thing?
Yes. Basically, like, you have to set up this your base location with an altar.
With an altar,
in the first place, and this altar has a certain range that you can also see if you have a built tool in hand, like a pickaxe or the construction hammer or something. You see this glowy line in the landscape around your base, and this is basically the protected area that will not regenerate.
So that doesn't regenerate. Okay.
So within your base, every change you make is permanent, and it's going to be saved. And outside of your base, it's going to regenerate after a certain amount of time. So I think it's currently set to half an hour, and you have to be away from that area. So it just doesn't.
So it won't regenerate while you're there. It will regenerate.
It won't regenerate while I'm sitting there, right? So because otherwise I might be stuck in a rock or something. That would be good. So that's basically having two reasons. The one thing is you might play with people, they might destroy the entrance to a dungeon or something with bombs to a degree that's hard to repair, and then you're sitting there and you can't go there anymore or something, which would be sad. So I think regenerating that, or in general respawning bosses and other things, refilling chests, a thing that you can have another friend of you join you and he can still play all the quests and he can still get the loot and then fight the bosses again together with you, just to follow up and then power level basically to get to your level so you can progress together again. So it was important for us that the word respawns. The permanent voxel changes, again, like it's dangerous if we would make it permanent. And the other part of it is it will obviously needs to be saved, and it needs to be keeping all these changes in memory. And there are hard limits to that. Obviously, at some point, the min spec doesn't support that anymore. So what do we do? So for now, we put a limitation on the amount of bases you can build and the maximum size a base can have, which is, I think, 160 meter cube.
It's pretty big. It's pretty
big, and you can also overlap them, so you can have 4 bases next to each other to make it even bigger, like having a huge castle or whatever it is that you want to build. So I think the size is hopefully decent enough for players to go crazy with their creativity, but we wanted to put in a technical limitation also for that reason, that we don't want to make it in a way we keep it open and the game will just crash or don't save your stuff at a certain point. Maybe some other games, I'm not sure how other games deal with this, if they allow any kind of modification in the world. And it's a voxel game. I mean, on a 2D plane, it's easier because it's just much less information to store. But with voxels, it's a tough memory limit that we run into.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering if there was regeneration or how you guys were handling that. Because again, I feel like there were some things that I had changed a long time ago and they were still there. But now I get reminded, I think I have a base in that location, and that's probably why those holes are still in the ground.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just you forget, because you set up some of these bases as just fast travel points, and you forget they're even there for anything else. But all of the voxels.
Yeah, it's fine. But if you take them away again, those things will be.
Those things will regenerate.
So you need to be careful with your home base to not remove the flame, otherwise you might lose that. Not instantly while you're still there. You can put it to some other place, but make sure you do that before you go away or something, or let it in that state for too long.
But that is one of the things.
Bad awakening.
That is one of the things that has led to some really interesting moments in our adventures as well with the voxel technology. So, for instance, I like having one base, But because in this game you have a glider, which is one of the things we haven't even talked about. The traversal in this game is actually a lot of fun. You got glider, you have grappling hook. That's one of the things that I think you should maybe consider even including in combat at some point. Like having some grappling hook uses like that. Again, just throwing out suggestions, but it's like that having both a glider and a grappling hook does make things more dynamic. But I was like, okay, so if I have a glider, I want to make my base in the tallest place possible.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was I go to the bottom of, I think the place is called Pillars of Creation. I think it's one of the tallest mountains in the game.
Biggest mountains, yeah.
And I just make a base there, and I put one of those tool things so that you can keep repairing. And then I grab the crappiest pickaxe in the game. I start digging straight up.
Yeah, some people did that just to look up what's up there. But yeah.
No, I didn't. And then I built a base there. It's like, this is my base now on top of this huge mountain. So that was a really cool moment. Another really cool thing was that at one point, a friend of mine was exploring the Shroud because he was looking for some specific materials that only appear in the Shroud. And then it was like, oh, I'm running out of time. And he couldn't find a way out. And so I'm like, oh, I'm going to teleport to the tower near you. And so we start moving. I start looking for ways to come out of the Shroud. And we find one, but there's a wall in the way, and we're both throwing grenades really fast so that he can get out of there before the thing. So there's a lot of organic moments that come about from the Shroud mechanic and the voxel technology, which I think you guys have done a really good job with.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's what we were hoping for. That obviously, as a game, like designing a game, you try to make sure that people don't skip too much too easily and then get into a bad place with too high enemies and stuff and get screwed and have a bad time or something. But at the same time, yeah, it is really about people just having fun. And if they want to get the weight in a creative way, get around an obstacle that we set there, then sure, go for it. And people, try to dig as deep as they can and see what's there. And people try to get up to the highest mountains or build up a huge bridge across the Shroud that they can't cross yet. So they try to skip that part with building. We don't put a barrier on that. I mean, we got reports and people say, oh, should we fix that in some ways? And I think no. I mean, as long as it's not the most obvious, most easy way to go about the game and then not have fun at the same time, then it's fair game. I mean, it's really, as you explained, like these moments where you try to reach a position that you think is attractive. It's not meant you to go up there because there's maybe no content yet or something, but you just want to build there for the view, then sure, why should we make a barrier for that? Or if you try to find a creative way out of the Shroud or into an enemy camp or whatever it is, sure, that's the great moments that stick to your head basically in your memories. And that's what I meant with the player stories. I mean, everyone's talking about these things and it's hard to replicate. But it's really mostly about that. It's less about the literal storytelling. Like there's lore in the game, like the past of the world, but we don't try to prescribe too hard what players are supposed to do in the end. Obviously there is quests and stuff, but it's really about these kind of moments that we hope players will have building, exploring in combat, where things go wrong or things get solved in a surprising way and people just laugh and then keep it in the memory and talk about it later on still.
It's one of those things, like I'm not really going to remember that much about, remember when I went and I rescued the blacksmith? I don't, but I'm probably never going to forget my friend about to run out of Shroud time, about to die, and we're both just like frantically trying to blow up a wall between us so that he can get through to get away. That it's organic, almost like emergent gameplay, and I think that is a really fun thing, and it just shows you a lot of potential that the game has in that aspect, which is one of the reasons why I liked it as much as I did. So the game is going to feature, like it already does feature, a lot of exploration, crafting, in-depth crafting system, and the crafting system is definitely one of the things that I feel you guys need to work a little bit more on, maybe tutorializing or something, because I find it super hard to like craft one thing. Like let's say I want to craft this piece of armor. Okay, you need I don't know what is the last thing that I get, that it's some type of roll of I'm missing the word.
Or something?
Yeah, some type of fabric that I needed. And I was like, okay, how do I make this fabric? Okay, I need salt. Okay, where do I get salt? And there's all of these things. And no, eventually I just go and I look it up online because I don't remember when I found salt last time. I have like
Mm-hmm.
2 in the box, but I don't know where that came from. So do you
Mm-hmm.
have maybe plans to make this a little, not simplify the system, because I don't think you need to simplify it, but kind of explain to players better, particularly
Mm-hmm.
let's say somebody goes away from the game for a while, like right now, because I've been playing recently, I know exactly how to get flax because I looked
Mm-hmm.
it up and I was like, okay, how do I get flax? Okay, we get the seedling bed, we plant it, we put it there. Now we have as much flax as I want. But let's say I take a break because this is early access. You guys add another patch like 3-4 months down the line. I was like, oh man, I'm jump back in. Then it's like, oh, how do I make flax again? Right. That
Mm-hmm.
that is one of the things that I think is still a problem that you might have in the game. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we also talked about that, and yeah, didn't work on that specific part yet. I mean, obviously, we try to make it intuitive enough that people, yeah, that it's not completely obscure what goes into like to create an item, like not make it a magic box how to craft, as some other games do as well, but um, give you a recipe and also give you the possibility to pin a recipe so you can carry it around while you go exploring for these ingredients, and you can remember that you don't have to have it in your head. Um, but yeah, what we thought about, and it's a bit of a UI problem there, is that in the crafting menu, you see the recipe and you see what kind of ingredients you need. There's currently no way for a controller to go to the ingredient itself to get a tooltip to that. With the mouse, that would be easier, obviously. And it's something we discussed at least that we probably should improve at some point to give you some context to the ingredient itself before you have it. As you explained, you don't
Yeah.
know where to find it. Um, Oftentimes, yeah, you get sent into areas where you will find these ingredients naturally. Like it's not like you play in this area, but the ingredient is somewhere completely different typically. But um, at some point, we obviously also want people to search for it in the first place. But sure, there's no way to look it up unless yeah, you could have a tooltip on this thing to give you some more context for this. So that is something we probably want to improve at some point. Same for other things. I mean, we have the journal, which tracks your progress, which tracks lore and other things, where you can also look up recipes. And yeah, we had also more plans of things you can look up in there, for example. So that might be something like discovering ingredients and getting an entry there that explains more about it and where to find it if necessary might be also an option to go about it. But yeah, I see that there's obviously room for improvement. I hope it's still already somewhat intuitive to craft stuff, but it is a lot of ingredients that we have already and a lot of intermediate steps that we also
Yeah.
constantly discuss about how many intermediate steps do we want to have in this recipe, or go we straight from the source to the target. And yeah, it's always a fine balance of making things not too shallow, but at the same time not overwhelmingly complex. Yeah.
Although I will say, like you were saying, a lot of the times you just organically go there, and it was funny because the thing that I was trying to craft required me to go get something for the hunter NPC, because
Mm-hmm.
again I didn't know what the thing was, and funnily enough, that was the quest that I even had active at the time that I was looking for this material. I'm like, I need this material. I don't want to go do this quest right now, but I want this
Mm-hmm.
material so that I can craft this piece of armor. And then I look it up and it's like, no, you need to go do the exact quest that you have active right now to go get the tool that then lets you craft that thing. And I was like, damn, what's the odds? That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we try to structure the quest progression as well in a hopefully good way that you don't have too many simultaneously open, but at the same time have enough choice. Um, and yeah, guide you through the world to some extent, but always keep it open to you to take a turn to the left and just do your thing and don't care about the current quest or something
Yeah.
and just go explore, hopefully. So yeah, again, like in a lot of places, there's room for improvements. And yeah, with the first content update we made some improvements, like making stack splitting easier and making gifting easier and these kind of little things that help players just play the game in a more convenient way. Um, but yeah, there's still more stuff that is on the list. I mean, we have this board for suggestions. where people could post their suggestions, and there are thousands of suggestions already. With
I can
thousands
imagine.
of upvotes, and that's totally cool because that really informs us a lot of what people probably want, and it's not just us guessing. And we always try to find a sweet spot between what we have planned for the game and what people wish for, and make a good choice for the next update to still have some surprises in there.
So if I was to put like the four main pillars of the game that you have right now, maybe you'll disagree, but I would say it's like you got exploration because you have a massive world, lots of space to explore, and apparently you can't even access the whole world at this point, right? Because the map seems like it's way bigger than what we can navigate to. So there's still plenty more coming.
Left,
yeah. So exploration, crafting, building, and combat. I would say these are like your four pillars basically when it comes to the gameplay.
Yeah, I think that's.
Do you plan on balancing this kind of like leaning more towards one aspect or the other? Or do you want to like, no, we want to keep these perfectly balanced, this level of exploration, this level of crafting?
Yeah, I mean, also that might change, like the balance of things will change also per location. Let's say the hollow halls, for example, are mostly about combat.
Yeah.
For sure, there's also some exploration in there, like there are secrets hidden, but they are rather linear in structure. But then we have more open areas, which are more about exploration and discovery and stuff, but less about combats. And I think there was also a key thing for us from the beginning that we make the game, as we had this intention to make it more multiplayer friendly, that a mixed group of players can have the most fun of it. Typically, also when I play games of this type with some friends, it's a bit of a mixed group. I don't have enough time to join them all the time, so they're far more advanced typically and then have the best weapons and whatever it is. But I can still do some stuff in the game, like to help them out, or they just give me a lot of stuff and I can follow around. But typically it's really fun with I think again like survival or sandbox games in general, that you can bring in a mixed group of people. Some people just care about building, some people just care about exploring, and some others care most about combats, or a mix of some of that to different degrees. But it's all fine. And also playing not the same amount of time. If you play more of a team-focused game, like a PvP game or something, everyone on the team needs to be on the top of their game, basically, to be part of the group. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to be part of that group. It doesn't work, basically, if someone screws up. But in these games, you can just log in once a week and others play every day, but you can still do some stuff that advances the game to some degree. You can craft something or do some farming, or I don't know, go exploring and discover some stuff that others can join in later. And the full group can have fun together. And I think that's a core thing we wanted to keep alive. That was super important for us. So basically, having this balance of all these pillars was important. That makes it tough to have these many features in the game, basically juggling all of them in a good way.
But to basically try to ride that limbo of where somebody can go and they can grind for a bunch of hours, but their more casual friend can still join in and you can still do stuff together.
Exactly. That's the aim we have. It's a place where you can hang out with your friends and go on adventures and have fun together. And you can do it as relaxed or as intense as you want it to be, hopefully. As I said, like it's more like about different locations that we offer that have a focus on something. Like the hollow halls are definitely more challenging, and other places are more about exploration or finding a sweet spot for a base or resource mining or whatever it is. That is a different type of activity, and also mixing that up is what makes this game more attractive to some players, because obviously we can't compete just with the combat, for example.
Yeah.
You have these Souls-like comparisons, but we will never be Elden Ring. I mean, there's no chance we can have the same production values in combat and hundreds of bosses that they have in there and compete head-on with a AAA game in that sense. Same for role-playing games. We're not the next Witcher or the next Cyberpunk or something in terms of the sheer production value of stuff and the way storytelling is done and all these kind of things. We're a different thing. We're borrowing certain aspects from other games, I would say, to make it an interesting and different experience, but it's really this mix of things that come together that hopefully is is creating the fun. It's not just this one feature that is polished to death, that is just making it great.
So the next thing I'm going to ask you, I don't want to hold you to it, but I would say that this is a much more hard question to answer, maybe, or maybe you don't even want to give the answer, which is fine. But like, you're in early access. The current version of the game is 0.71 something. Mm-hmm. What would you say is like from the vision that you guys currently have for Enshrouded? How far along do you think you are in the game's current state? How far along do you think you are on that vision from like 0% to 100%? If you want to get again,
it's hard to say it in a percentage. I think it's different aspects to it that we still want to do. Some of them are like, we put out a roadmap. So like, for example, making it more connected and then giving people more options to share their creations in some way is something that is important, but it's not a percentage of the game so far because that's just non-existent right now. I mean, people share their save games on Discord, for example, so there's one way to go about it, but that's not what it's fine, but obviously we want to make things more accessible and more immersive. And there's a lot on that front that we aim for, but there's also, like, as you mentioned, the map is not completely filled. It's actually less than half filled right now. And there's still a good bunch of stuff we want to add there. Obviously not the same amount of biomes maybe, but different things require different sizes and stuff. But there's still a lot of just content of the world that we want to add. There's other aspects to it. I mean, the world is pretty, it's three-dimensional world, obviously. There's caves and all these kind of things, and it's also something that makes it different to be a voxel game, as you can do all these kind of interesting shapes in the world. But we didn't tap too much like the world underground, for example, or other aspects. Like there's different dimensions to it that we want to tackle. Obviously in gameplay there's a lot of things, like we talked about combat and more weapon types and other things, the skill tree, the level cap, and it's hard to tell, like the game is whatever X% finished, like let's say 70% because it's 0.7.
That's what I was thinking.
I'm not sure if that would be fair.
But I don't think you're 70% of the way there from what I've seen so far. So even though it's 0.7%, I don't think it would make 0.7 version.
Exactly. So I would struggle to give you a percentage, but we definitely don't want to take forever to get out of early access with a 1.0 release. We want to have a bunch of meaningful releases that completes the world in that sense and completes the experience. What we also do is review what we have so far, obviously, not just the balancing, but also the locations in the world, the enemies in the world. Do we need to make changes to them, or do they need additions in their families, basically, like we did with the Hollow Halls? We added additional types of skeletons, like a skeleton mage and an elite guy and a weakling and other things. That makes this whole faction of enemies more interesting, but all over the world as well. It's not just in the Hollow Halls that got this addition, or we rebuilt a town that existed in the world completely, and we will do more of that, or a well in the world was completely rebuilt, because we felt the initial version, it was doing the trick functionally, and it was still a nice experience, I think, but it could be better even. Like we think there's more potential, and so we try to fine-tune even the existing parts of the world to a certain degree where we think, we can improve on stuff. So it's both of this for the world itself, and then, obviously there's more features coming in as well with new biomes that we still want to add. Like there's talk about weather, for example, that is still missing, and it was also sad. There was also something I wished for release, but we just couldn't make it all. Obviously, it was already a lot of stuff to have a release with, and we wanted to make sure that the release version is well working and not like a broken mess. Like have a game that you can buy and play, and not worry about the early access state too much, which also did well for Portal Knights, where we added more stuff that we wanted to have in there initially, even over time. But the base game was there, and it was fun to play. So there's a lot of things we want to add, and it's really hard to say it in a percentage. But maybe it's the amount of content updates that we make until release. I'm also not 100% sure about the numbering there the 0.7 if it's exactly 3 more things, and then we have a 1.0. Yeah, that's also a bit depending on the timing for each update, as some updates will take a bit more time than others. Like some things like the next biome, like the full-blown biome, will be bigger undertaking in terms of the amount of stuff that needs to go into this. So this is nothing we could do in the same time frame as we did the Hollow Halls, for example, which wasn't a full-blown biome, but a specific thing. And yeah, so we don't have we have a roadmap for us internally in terms of
course.
How a timeline looks like. We don't have a fixed date for release yet, I can tell you that. And we will take the time to make the updates hopefully well-rounded and meaningful. They will all have a different priority in terms of what they deliver. Like the Hollow Halls were more combat focused, but other updates might be more focusing on different things. Yeah.
What do you think is the current most important thing for you guys right now, that you feel like you need to add that into the game, reasonably soon? I mean, again, if you're comfortable, because I don't know how much stuff you've even revealed and whatnot. I've looked at the roadmap, but it was very quickly took a glance. I have some stuff specifically about that I want to ask you, but I'm just wondering, like, in your mind, what is, okay, the next big thing that we need to work on is this?
I mean, there are some things, but I'm a bit reluctant to say that, because those are the things that will take the most time and are more uncertain, I would say, when they will be delivered. Like I said, with the biome example, which is a bit more straightforward, but it's just a lot of work to get it right, because it needs more progression, more materials, more crafting, more everything, basically. There are other things like, okay, let's take an example. Let's say weather, for example, is a complex thing, and we don't have a finished design for all aspects of that. Like, we have high-level design for it, but there are a lot of things. It's not just a gameplay thing. It's also a lot of rendering questions and other things. It taps into a lot of places.
Especially in a voxel game where everything changes and your weather system has to account for how it falls in a specific thing. What if the player removed the ceiling from a cave and now rain needs to go through there? Yeah.
For example,
are you planning, for instance, in having weather interactions, like considering that there are physics to some extent in the game? Like if there's wind, maybe it pushes you sideways when you're gliding or something like that. If there's rain, because I've seen even earlier today that there's like these casters that cast lightning. Would lightning deal more damage and fire deal less damage because it's raining? Is that something that you're thinking about? Or again, if you can even talk about it.
Yeah, as I said, like there's no finished design. We have a high-level design for weather, and it's really high level for now. So it will take a bit more time to get this in, although I would wish to add it sooner, because I think that adds a lot of atmosphere, even without the gameplay aspect of it already, and is something that is lacking for a game of this type. Like, it's part of the survival feel, at least. We definitely want to tie it to gameplay system, so far I can say. So it's not just decorational, but to what extent and how we do it exactly, there's still different options in some places, and it's not 100% clear how we want to go about it. Like, there's more discussions needed. Some people necessarily are, for example, on holiday right now as we prepare another update. And yeah, we want to make sure that it's done in a way that it's sustainable, because again, like, the game is supposed to be extended for years to come, and so we don't want to hastily add something that causes trouble down the road, which makes it sometimes harder to do something as quick as people would wish for, me included. So that's a thing. But yeah, weather, for example, is something I was hoping to get into release, and then hopefully I have soon, but it still will take a bit more time. So I can say it's not going to be in the next update, unfortunately.
Yeah. So tell me about water, because initially I, like, when I thought about the shroud mechanic, I was like, oh, this is what they have instead of water. They got rid of water, and instead of water, we have this shroud mechanic. I think I might have even mentioned that, like, my first impressions of it. I don't remember. It was a while ago. But, like, to me, that was the concept, which is why there's a timer, because you can't breathe underwater. So this is almost like water. But then you guys revealed in the thing you're actually adding water. How's that going to work? Are we going to get water in existing biomes, or is that, like, a new biome only type of thing?
Yeah, again, like also water is one of these more tricky things, especially in the voxel world. If water should flow, like on what scale? I mean, we have a very large world, and water could be everywhere. Yeah, like there's a big lake, and you poke a hole in it. What happens?
Yeah, exactly.
So, do you flood that valley? We also added that at a later date in Portal Knights, for example. Also a voxel game, but a little more constrained. You were playing on islands, which were big, but not as huge as the world is currently, and it was flowing and stuff, but it's a bigger technical thing that we need to think about how we can do this. So it's again like further down the road, and it was also a bit of a discussion to actually even put it on the roadmap, because it's still not 100% clear how we do it, or if it will work well enough with all the networking and all these kind of things that come into it as a multiplayer game in a virtual world, to make it work well enough on our min spec that comes on top. So, but yeah, we wanted to have water from the beginning as well, and we decided again like to not include it in the early access release, because it's really a tough thing to crack. But we want to introduce it at a later date, because obviously it adds a lot to a world. It's an easy to understand concept, basically, from the player's perspective, like a natural barrier, a new interesting barrier to explore different worlds, so similar to the Shroud, basically. But yeah, we also lore-wise settled on the way that the water ways in the game have changed and then evaporated and stuff like this. So it will be probably introduced together with a different biome, but it's again like a further down the road thing, because it's one of the most tricky problems to add to the game.
You're making a beach resort biome then. That's where we're at, 100%.
With beach balls and everything, obviously.
Enshrouded's very own Costa del Sol.
your holiday resort base. We'll see how that ends. But so again, like this is nothing I can make any promises about, but we definitely want to make it happen. There's a very high demand from players that we've seen. We were very reluctant to actually make an announcement about it, but we are thinking how to implement that in a good way, as we did with Portal Knights. With Portal Knights, we released that, but again, like, please don't hold me accountable for this too much, as it's really one of the toughest things we can add to the game.
Because water then also adds, of course, ships and ship combat, and of course, it's a pirate game.
Sure,
now.
Pirate game. Sea of Thieves is also announced at the same time.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of room for extending the game in all directions and putting even more features on top of it and making it the game of all games.
But another one of the things that you mentioned that caught my attention was townsfolk NPCs. I don't know if you can elaborate on that a little bit, because that is one of the things I'm very curious, because we don't actually have NPCs in the game besides the 6 or 7 now that we rescue from the dungeons and whatnot. There's nobody else in the world other than you and the other players. So what's the idea behind these townsfolk NPCs?
Yeah, so just the setup of the game is like a post-apocalyptic world, also for the reason that we were very clear about the fact that we can't make a full-blown role-playing game with towns full of people and they talk to each other and all these kind of things you would expect in a classical RPG. So that's something we didn't want to make the appearance of, like we're an RPG but crappy or something. So we said let's not go for it. But from the base building perspective, we want players to build creative large bases, but obviously it's a lot of space. And people go already crazy with building cool stuff in little towns or refurbishing towns. And then it's empty, and that's sad as well. Like you have a handful of people, but it's not as many. And so that's a thing we definitely want to address. And that is certainly something from that angle, that you have a living base, basically. And also that NPCs are not as static, basically, and they can roam around and these kind of things. Same for farming, that you can have animals in your base and these kind of aspects, part of the roadmap as well, and go in the same direction. I think that's a thing that we want to go for, more from the perspective of making it a nice living place than making it a godlike management game in the end or something, where you have your population and everything else. So we don't want to get
so they would work
too far in that direction. But finding more NPCs and settling them in your base, and they will walk around the place and these kind of things. That's
okay. So you'll still be finding them out in the world the same way that you find the current NPCs, and then you bring them over to your base. It's kind of like the same thing, but these will actually walk around the base and have their own set routines and stuff like that.
Something like this, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was wondering if you were going to be finding these in the towns that already exist in the game that are abandoned, but no, you're going to find them like prisoners somewhere, whatever, bring them over, something of that nature.
Yeah, we will. I mean, again, like I can't talk too much about
that.
You will, as we plan to have a good amount of those, we also didn't decide the exact amount and when to use those, but we will make them discoverable also in the existing parts of the world. Like it's not like all happening in a new biome or something that's still to come. So that we will retrofit that into the world and into the existing locations. And yeah, we don't have a specific plan. This guy goes here or something. But that's the idea, that people playing the game and want to find all of them. They have to discover them in certain places.
Have you considered companions for players that only like to play solo? Because I can tell you that there's a large portion of the gaming community that they usually like to play solo. I personally like more to play with friends, but I know for a fact that there's usually a lot of people, I'd like to play solo. And have you considered companions? Like something that is not as effective as another player, but they can like be in there just like healing you a little bit, or maybe you're the tank and they deal a little bit of damage. Just like, a little bit of a help for the solo player.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely talked about this. It's currently not on our roadmap.
Okay.
So it will take a bit more time to think about if and how we would add something like this, because it also makes everything more busy. If you have 5 players and they bring all the companions with them.
No. I don't think you should let them bring companions if they're playing multiplayer. I think this would be like a single player only type thing.
Sure. I mean, and like Sons of the Forest has a pretty cool companion thing going on.
I haven't played it.
I also haven't played it yet. I definitely want to, just to get a better idea. Just watch videos and think, wow, that's interesting. It's obviously a tough thing to make it convincing. And I think they made a good choice there. Again, I haven't played it yet, but not making it look like he's a guy that does everything easily on his own. So yeah, it's always a bit of a struggle, as companions in games most of the time have sucked to some degree. Like they were not really effective, get stuck everywhere, and then some kind of an annoyance oftentimes. We added companions for visual customization in Portal Knights at some point. Like you could be followed by a little pet cat or a little dragon or something like this. Those were more on the cosmetic end of things. You could find them in game, and we've struggled with the idea of giving them extra power, so to say, because the balancing didn't leave much room to add more power to that, although that's still always a possibility to rebalance stuff to make it work. Like you always add some more power to the player. And it gets overpowered at some point. But I think the idea is obviously attractive. That's pretty clear. We did it in the past. I wouldn't rule it out, but it's probably not going to happen very soon, because we have the roadmap and there's a lot of stuff on there that we need to tackle first, I think. It's not that we only work on things that are on the roadmap. There will always be some stuff that is not specifically on the roadmap. We'll see how that goes. I understand the point, especially for solo players. I thought about it more like, should we have pets following you or companions following you all the time for every player? Maybe for single player only might be a different angle. That's true.
I don't think you should have it do it all the time. I think it's something that if a player wants to have a companion, like that, but it's whatever. It's just hypotheticals.
I get the point. I think Nightingale also has companions of that type. I'm also not 100% sure. I only played it a bit yet. How many they will allow and stuff, but I think it needs to be done well to be satisfying.
Yeah.
If the companion struggles too much, people are easily annoyed more than happy, I guess. So yeah, pathfinding needs to work well and all these kind of things. And in Pawn Knights, we took shortcuts with like pets being stuck, just teleporting to you and stuff like this. And it was overall more cartoonish, so that was fine, I guess. Let's see. But yeah, certainly a valid point. Just not sure when we could tackle something like this.
Well, like one of the things that I'm most excited for in the roadmap is you guys mentioned instance dungeons. Can you expand on that at all, or is that just look, we're doing instance dungeons? That's it. That's all you get.
yeah, sure. I mean, that's also something. The hollow halls currently exists within the game, but they're also something that you teleport into because we wanted to make it a confined space with its own rules, basically, to some degree. Like you can't set up a base in there or something. Because we want to make it a challenge.
That's implemented. That's implemented so well that I actually forgot you do teleport. There's like a teleporter inside the thing, and then it just takes you to the place. Yeah, you're right. Exactly. And then you teleport out. Like I almost forgot. I just thought, oh yeah, I went in there and I started adventuring, and that was it. Because you do, because you do the same thing in the towers, right? As you're climbing the towers, you go to the teleporter. It just takes you to a floor above, so it's whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, so those are actually in world. Also, the floors of the towers are in the world, as you can see if you look out there through a window. But the hollow halls are somewhere else. Currently, they sit in the world, but the idea is to get them out into a separate scene, basically, that you load and then load back into the world, because that makes things easier and less obtrusive. They don't need to sit in the world. They are something separate anyway.
It makes things easier to manage from a performance standpoint, especially with the number of enemies we got in the end section. Yeah.
There was also another concern, like if it's in the world and under shallow ground, you build your base on top, and then you have this dungeon going on below, and you don't even know it. So that's something we want to address at some point. Right now, it doesn't matter so much because it's outside the regular world range that they are placed. But the idea is to bring them into instances, and we always toyed with the idea to have instance dungeons that have more randomized aspects to it. So there's more, a stronger potential replay value to them as they are.
So procedural generation?
Again, like we don't have a fixed concept for those.
Yeah.
We originally for the game planned to have procedural dungeons, but we strayed away from that for various reasons for the original release. But it's still something that we think about because it might be interesting to have some places that are different all the time. In Pawn Knights we had the rifts, which worked, and they were also a special place, so it's not exactly that we have in mind, but they were basically randomized dungeons that you could visit as a group, and there was like other rules around them, like time limits and stuff. But I could imagine having separate spaces that have more randomization to it. Maybe the encounters are different, or maybe the whole location is different in certain places, or we have different locations that get shuffled around and you don't know where you land. There's a lot of possibilities to do this once we would have instancing in some form. Right now, that isn't in. That's why the dungeons are still in the main world. But the idea is to have the technology for that to make it possible, and then we will develop a deeper concept how instance dungeons should work in our case. Again, like we did some stuff like this in the past, but I'm not sure if we would make it a similar thing than that. Probably it will have different rules, but yeah, giving more places that have a different way of replayability basically is some idea behind that.
It's just like ever since I started playing MMORPGs long time ago, that was like one of my favorite type of content. You get like 4 or 5 people and you do an instance dungeon. That was always the type of stuff that I liked. So instance dungeons sounds really exciting for something like Enshrouded.
It's also something like with the Hollow Halls, we first thought about how high should we make this level requirement. Like in the beginning, we thought about should we cap it at like make it 4 players presence hard or something. Like if you don't bring 4 friends, you will have a tough time. So you could maybe still solo it, and some people did on the team when we tried it out. But it was really harsh, so we dialed it back down. But we certainly are open to have more challenging things in the game in the future at some point. although we want to keep the door open for people to solo it in a way.
Yeah.
And also we try to make it in the long run easier to play together with strangers, potentially, to bring in friends, but in a safe way. Like even if you don't have your gaming friends around because they play a different game or something, you might tap into the community and bring someone in without the danger of him destroying or stealing or whatever, doing something bad to your base or something, which is currently, unfortunately, still a thing. If you allow people to enter your base, you need to be careful. But yeah, it's also something we have on the roadmap, like server settings, that we can make this more secure for people to join forces with others. And then it's also easier for us to add, in some places, not the main road through the game for sure, but on the side of it, offer some tougher challenges for people who really seek it. And then maybe an instance dungeon might be something like this then.
Yeah, I think the game definitely has a lot of potential. Like I said, I was very surprised when I started playing it. One of the things that I don't really have a good segue for this. This is just something that I forgot to ask earlier. It's a very specific combat thing that I'm wondering if this is a design decision or something that is just not polished up yet. Have you noticed that when you block, you're bringing up your shield, but then let's say, for instance, you are about to block, but an enemy hits you and you're pressing the button, but the shield stays down. So is that a design decision, or is that something that in the future, no, the shield's going to come back up? Because a lot of times I'm trying to like do proper parry timings, right? You're practicing your parry timings and you get hit. Then I'm like, okay, I need to block the next thing. So I'm going to keep the button pressed, but the shield doesn't come back up. I'm wondering if that's like a responsiveness thing, or if that's just like, no, you made a mistake and now we want you to mash the button until the shield comes back up. Or
you mean like after a parry, for example? Yeah, I think for some actions, we deliberately made it a choice that the shield doesn't automatically return, but we actually this week talked about reversing that potentially, like for parrying. As yeah, it's maybe too punishing then in some situations where we do that.
To give you an example, right? I'm trying to parry one of those green dudes with the dual hatchets, right? And I'm trying to practice because those are probably one of the most challenging enemies that I've fought in the game so far. So I'm trying to practice the parry. So I might land a parry and that's good, but sometimes I'll miss the parry and the enemy's still charging. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to put the shield down and then I'm going to try to put it back up. But the thing is, I'll put the shield down, he hits me, and then I'm pressing the button, but the shield stays down. And I'm just wondering if that's intentional.
Not to a full extent, for sure. I mean, there are some situations where we try to prevent that, for example, or will try to prevent that a bit more than now. For example, now you can shield spam while shooting a wand. Like you can shoot and instantly bring the shield back up. It's actually missing. So you walk backwards, you wave your wand and keep your shield up all the time. You're basically pretty good with that tactic. So there are occasions where we try to deliberately stop you from doing this. In some cases, it might be a balancing thing. In some cases, I think that the parry itself is still something we will probably refine more. There's timing issues with the multiplayer side of things, like we have a prediction running, and there are certain windows when you can press stuff, and when the server knows, and when the client knows again that the server accepted that you parried correctly and this kind of thing. So there are certain windows when you could do stuff, and it doesn't always match perfectly yet with our expectation, like looking at it from how we would design it, with what's possible under the hood to make it happen. There have been some improvements, but I think that's something we should further improve. And at the same time, the question how long this downtime should be after a certain action.
Yeah.
Like the one example where it's definitely the other way around. There should be a downtime, so you can't just spam it. But in this example, I'm not 100% aware of it, but it might be something that we can tweak because it's action sequences where we put timings in there.
Another similar thing in that vein is also like when you're running and you want to stop running, so you'll let go of the key, or in the case of the controller, you'll let go of the thing, you'll stop moving and then get moving again. You're still running, so it doesn't stop, and it's kind of bad for the stamina management thing. I'm just wondering, why is there a huge delay there between the running and like, for instance, if you're running on a keyboard, you press shift and then you're like, okay, I want to stop running. So you let go of shift, but your character is still running.
Is it still so long running? Is it big?
Or it might be a controller thing. It might be a controller thing. Cause like, you press down on L3, right?
Yeah.
And you're running.
Okay, yeah, sure.
And then you stop moving so that you're like, because usually when you're running on a controller, you're like, okay, I'm going to stop moving to get rid of the running thing. But then you start moving again and you're still running.
Ah, okay. Maybe it's something that has to do then with the dead zone as well, but I would have to check myself. I also play with controller, but didn't feel that specific thing yet. But maybe something is broken, but maybe you didn't dial it back to complete stop.
And it might
keep
be
this
that
running state going. So there's at least a threshold probably where it opts out. But yeah,
But
waving in the background.
Yeah, I know. I know that we have to wrap up. I just wanted to give you the last word if you wanted to say anything else about the game at this point.
I think the last thing I can say is to thank all the players that have joined us during early access. I mean, I know that it's always a commitment to buy an early access game in the first place and make sure that you don't get a broken mess or something. So really, thanks for that, and I hope more will join us and keep playing the game and giving us good feedback like you did right now. So that we can refine it, because that really helps us a lot to get an understanding of what people like and dislike and what is broken and needs to be fixed. I mean, we try to monitor various sources like reviews and Reddit and our Discord and everywhere, but yeah, so it's always good to have that feedback and then take this into account and not just have our own ideas, pushing it out there and saying, it's fine like this. Because in a game that complex, it's hard to fix everything on your own. So really, and really appreciate to giving us the support to keep going with the game for a really long time as this.
Well, you guys have definitely tackled a very ambitious project. It's looking pretty good so far, and I can't wait to see where it goes. Thank you very much for your time, Antony. And
thanks for the invitation.
Thank you all very much for watching. If you guys enjoyed it, hit the like button, subscribe bell, notification icon, all that jazz, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe. Peace out.